祭にを励し Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me is one of my returning good brothers in this temple. Coming to us from Lone Colossus Games, previously here for the Tome of Intangible Treasures, and has been here for the ways to make your combat more lethal in 5e. Now coming to us with even more Tomes of Intangible Treasures, this time Volume 2, focused primarily on boons, charms, and rituals, which we'll be getting into. The one and only Josh Rosing. How you doing today, man?
Good. Good to be back.
As my chiropractor often says, glad to see you're back. So, the original tome was a collection of magic and magic-adjacent kinds of items. Whereas this one...
Yeah, or not items exactly, but not non-item rewards, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Whereas this one is primarily themed around kicking monsters' asses and then taking their abilities.
Yeah.
With the rituals and rites that you have set up. Was this concept something that came to be during the original Tome's development and was just too big for that, or was there a different route?
A little bit of both, yeah. So, actually, the idea kind of, I would say, originates with a backer who had asked if I was gonna consider making the original book compatible with Heliana's crafting system. And at the time, I had reached out to Loot Tavern about that, and they said that they, usually prefer to get involved earlier on in the project. So that was immediately kind of like not this book. But it also immediately gave me the idea that, yeah, you could do like a ritual system. And I bet, since boons and charms are mechanically very similar to magic items, you could probably adapt any sort of crafting system to that. And I'd previously written a crafting system for 5e of my own. And so as I was working on finishing up the first book, I started thinking about what I was going to do next. And at that point I was like, let's ask the backers if they'd be interested in, rituals to steal the powers of enemies instead of just being given them, by powerful entities, right? So you can imagine, like, the first book is the boons and charms are all like, oh, you, cleaned out a temple and now you're getting blessed by a celestial being, or you've, saved some, fey entity or like a, some primal creature, and, they're rewarding you for that. And then in this new book, it's more like, oh, okay, well, there's a demon over there, or there's a, there's this special kind of creature that has this ability that I want. Let's go hunt it, harvest some parts from it, and then steal its magic.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I can certainly get that. Now, with that in mind, the idea of doing this as rituals, I think one of the obvious things to ask is, even though these are rituals, is the idea of rituals something that is agnostic to class, i.e. even martial characters could do these?
Yep. Now, it depends on what your skills are. So you can attempt a ritual even if you don't, say, like, have Arcana, but if you're trying to do a ritual to steal the power from an aberrant creature or like a fey creature, and you don't have Arcana as a skill, you're not going to be as good at it. But you could still attempt it. Yeah, there's no spell casting requirement for it. There's no specific class requirement. But people who have expertise in the specific skills that you use for the various categories of boons and charms. So aberrant, celestial, fey, primal, and holy are going to be better at conducting rituals of those types.
Yeah. But for something like, say, the purple worm you've got on the cover, that could be handled by most martial characters, I'm guessing.
Yeah. So like that would be a nature check probably, right?
So I'm guessing that you've got it where the different monster types are associated with different skills.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so those categories, and like, you know, aberrant as a category is pretty you know, much in line with just aberrations, but you know, I'd put like oozes and other like kind of weird, like, even if there's technically natural things, you know, things that kind of defy our normal reality type of natural stuff, as maybe more in that category. Celestial is, you know, again, pretty clearly like anything that's a celestial creature, but that could potentially include like a spirit that maybe it's not actually a celestial creature type, but is, you know, fills that sort of like, you know, divine sort of nature. Primal and unholy are maybe the more like broad categories. Primal being like, you got your elementals in there, you got just regular beasts, right? Magical creatures that are still like a natural part of the environment would all sort of fit into that category. And unholy is like undead and like demons and devils and stuff.
Mm-hmm. I could certainly see that. This does present the wonderful but horrifying idea of somebody trying to use this kind of thing on a Trask, but I'd imagine that the DC of doing the kind of check is going to be dependent on the CR of whatever you're harvesting from.
Yeah, so the DC for harvesting is based on the rarity of the component that you're trying to get. So like trying to get a component out of a legendary creature, or trying to get a legendary component, right, is going to be really hard. And then when you try and make something with it, it's gonna probably end up being a legendary, you know, rarity boon, in which case the DC to conduct the ritual is also very high, and you'll need a lot of progress to prepare for the ritual, which means it'll take longer, and the more progress that you get, the higher the DC becomes to get more progress. So you'll you know, maybe quickly proceed through the early stages of preparing the ritual, but then as you get toward those later stages, you'll be like, okay, we gotta like really, you know, get all of our resources together and see what we can do to like boost our check to actually make any progress toward it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can get that. But with that said, I need to hit the BRB for one moment, unfortunately with the timing. Hold on. am back. Sorry about the wait. Yeah, there was a bit of a last second surprise. So, getting back to what we had mentioned earlier. I suppose this kind of system would be a way to kind of sidestep the problem that ends up happening with rangers. in how rangers have kind of gotten the short end of the stick for years. But when it comes to the idea with rituals, is it a case where what would be the buy-in when it comes to getting rituals? Is it something that you'd be able to do right from character creation?
Yeah, there aren't any prerequisites for it. It's really just a matter of, can you succeed? So I've set it up so that you don't usually lose money if you fail. So it's mostly going to be you've lost time. So you can imagine you set up a ritual and you're making progress. You get your ritual prepared. You actually do the ritual and you don't have a high skill bonus. You don't roll well and you fail.
Yeah.
You don't waste the materials. I'm not into punishing players for doing cool stuff unless they're being stupid. And worst case, basically, if you fail the ritual, you're going to lose progress. And you just have to go back to the drawing board and basically study or get new. It could be that part of your preparation is getting ingredients, but there's not necessarily a gold cost that you're going to lose as part of that. You do have to pay money to get the ritual. It's not just a free magic item equivalent. But you're not spending money and then just losing it because you rolled poorly. It's in most cases it's just going to be, well, yeah, you don't have it yet. Keep trying. And if you have infinite time, yeah, you could skip that part. You could say yeah, if you have infinite time, you can just do this and eventually you'll have it right. The ritual check result is still important because if you fail in a certain way, then you can't stop the ritual in time. And you end up with a quirk. It still completes. You still get the thing that you're trying to enchant. You still get the boon or the charm, but it has this negative quirk associated with it. Or if you do really well, if you roll, a nat 20 and you critically succeed, then you can actually get a positive quirk on that as well.
All right, that I'd say works. Now, since the rarity is along 5 tiers, I'd like to go from lowest to highest and kind of get a feeling about what kind of monster would yield would yield material for a ritual of that tier.
Sure.
Starting with common.
Yeah, so common is usually going to be probably CR 1 to 3, your super basic monsters. And of course, there might be some more powerful monsters that also have, common ingredients, but say a CR 1 to 3 creature, mostly any ingredient that you get from them is going to be in the common, maybe uncommon. They might have a single uncommon material on them.
Uncommon.
Uncommon, and you're typically looking at a CR 4 to 8, right? So something on the more powerful scale for low level PCs to encounter. And they might also have rare ingredients as well. But uncommon's probably like your minimum that you're getting out of like a CR 4 to 8.
Yeah, CR 8 would be things like a Chain Devil, a Frost Giant, a
Right.
T-Rex, some young dragons. So rare.
So yeah, it was like I said, you might start encountering some rare materials around 4 to 8 as well, but for sure, CR 9 to 12, those are going to have some rare ingredients in them. Might still have uncommons, might start having very rare, maybe, but for sure they're gonna have rare ingredients.
Yeah, so things like a Deva or an Ifriti or a Horned Devil. So, with that in mind, what about very rare?
Yeah, so very rare. I mean, pretty much anything above that, right? So 13 to 18 is kind of what I would see as like you're likely to start seeing very rare in there.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get above 18, you're definitely looking at legendary, creatures. Like a CR 19, CR 20 or higher. You're probably gonna have some sort of legendary ingredient in there. Maybe not. Depends on part of it could depend on like how hard it is to actually get the material. So like a creature's eyes are probably going to be rarer than its scales because but then the creature itself is maybe rare or hard to kill, and so getting that material is still puts it in that different rarity category.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes now, I know you have the list of quirks, but I'm curious if you have something on the side where AGM could potentially make the quirks randomized for each type.
Yeah, I haven't specifically set that up, but there are four or five pre-made negative quirks for each type that you could just roll a d10 and or d5 technically, right? And randomize those. I also encourage DMs to just make something up. So I'm providing a very non-exhaustive list, right, of some quirks that I imagine that you could use, but like they're not specific to the creature or the specific boon, and so I would encourage DMs to look at maybe like the specific creature that they're using an ingredient from in the ritual, and then try and either choose one from the list that is most thematic for that, or just make something else up that makes sense.
Yeah. And I do want to cover the notion of ritual recipes. Is this the main way that the ritual setup is more or less done?
Yeah, so the recipe, it's just basically the list of what you need for it. So for example, in the sample PDF, in the ritual recipes section, I have the universal mind boon, and it lists the component, which is going to be an aberrations brainstem specifically from the ultramind creature. And then it has a cost. So this is a very rare boon. It's going to cost you 4,000 gold pieces to conduct that ritual. And then you also need to collect a certain amount of progress before you can actually do the ritual. So each recipe is also going to tell you how much progress you need for it, and that's based on the rarity of the ritual. So in this case, it'd be 8. So you have to make enough progress checks successfully to collect 8 progress, at which point you can actually attempt the ritual. And then the ritual type and skill. So it's an aberration component, and you're doing an aberrant boon, so this is an aberrant ritual, and you are going to use Arcana as your skill for the ritual.
Yeah. And of course, the longer it takes, the way you have it set up when it comes to progress, getting progress means that the DC next time is going to be higher.
Right. Yeah. So the progress essentially, when you read through the table for how much progress you need, or rather, how much progress you have determines the DC of the next check. So when you start out with 0 progress, DC is 10. After 1 progress, DC becomes 15. And if you look at it, it's actually essentially the amount of progress that you need for a boon of a given rarity is where the DC goes up again. So a common boon needs 1 progress. So you make 1 check and you succeed, and now you have your progress and you're done. Uncommon needs 2. So now the DC for that next check is higher. Rare needs 4. So once you're up beyond 3 progress, or once you have 3 progress, that next check to get that 4th one is higher, right? And or rather, sorry, once you have achieved those 4, I should say, then the next check is higher. So if you were, it's basically saying like, okay, you've achieved the progress you need for a rare ritual, but you're actually doing a very rare one. So now you need to put in all this extra effort to actually get to that next tier. And it's definitely like, I prefer this to saying, well, it's going to take you, 1 day to make a common boon or prepare a common boons ritual, but it's going to take you like 4 months to do legendary, because then you have to deal with time, and different campaigns are going to deal with time differently, and so just having this be a little bit more abstract, a little bit less specifically keyed to how much time it's taking, I think is a good way of you still represent that time with the increased difficulty, because obviously the higher the difficulty, the more likely you are to fail. And so like going from very rare to legendary, now you need 8 more progress, but those last 8 progress are at a DC of 30. So it is going to take you a long time, but if you're really good at it and you have a lot of help, you can actually do it a lot faster. Mm-hmm. It just depends on what your circumstances are.
Yeah, and there's also the fact that it means that if I've got the math right, it's far more likely that you're going to have that when you're dealing with the high tier boons. They're going to end up with some variety of quirk, since
there's that too. Yeah.
It sounds like if you fail the check by a certain threshold, you end up getting a higher chance of quirks, i.e., you succeed, but
yeah, and that also makes it less likely that you actually end up failing, right? So if you get lower than the DC, it doesn't mean, oh, ritual is over, got to start over and re-prepare again. No, you just you just have to. You either have a negative outcome because you made some mistake in your preparation, or maybe you catch that mistake and then you get this choice of, well, either I can finish this now and we'll just deal with the whatever minor outcomes there are, or we can say, hey, stop, don't say the last word, don't finish the last rune, whatever it is, right? And then we'll go back and get some more progress and actually try to prepare and do this again. So it gives you either an out or a way to finish it, and also it means that, like, yes, the DCs are high, but even if you get less than that, you're still probably going to get the thing you wanted. You just might also have something you didn't want.
Yeah, or maybe something you did. The meme of mission failed successfully is a thing.
Yep.
Which I'm glad for, because I always like fail forward as a concept. That idea that failing isn't necessarily a narrative stop. But now, boons and charms are something that we did kind of go into last time, but for the purposes of those who weren't here last time, would you mind going into what the dividing line is between a boon or a charm beyond, in this case, progress points?
Yeah, so boons are kind of your permanent enchantments. you can think about it as like your magic weapons or your wondrous items, right? Charms are the consumables version of these enchantments. So they typically either have a limited use, so it'd be like 1 or 3 uses, something like that, or it might be something where it only lasts for 2 weeks, or both, right? So it could be a lot of times they only last for 2 weeks, and also, you can use it once during that time, or you can use it 3 times during that time. And if you use it up, then it's gone. Some of them also have something where you get a flat bonus, or some semi-permanent effect for the duration of the charm, but at the end of the duration, it's gone. And any mix of those even. So some of them might be like, well, you get this minor bonus for the entire 2 weeks, but you can expend it in a huge surge of power to get a temporary big effect, but then it's gone after that, even before the 2 weeks are up.
Oh yeah. And with that in mind, I know that there's the whole requires attunement kind of thing as a limiting factor when it comes to magic items. What would you say would be the limiting factor when it comes to boons?
Yeah, I mean, you can technically have as many boons as you want. It's you're going to be limited in terms of being able to enchant yourself with new boons. You're obviously limited by can you collect those materials. So if you continuously go out on hunts, then yeah, you can keep getting those materials. Obviously, gold is a factor in this case. So if you're trying to conduct a bunch of rituals and you want to get a ton of really powerful boons enchanted on yourself, you're gonna have to pay a lot of money. So if you have all the money, great. But your DM could restrict how much money you're gonna have access to, or just really turn those hunts into full adventures, right? So like if you want this specific power, let's do a whole adventure where you have to learn about the creature, track it down, and prepare to hunt it, and then actually fight it, right?
I hear Capcom's working on a game about that.
Yeah, maybe a couple of them, huh?
Yeah, just a few. It's probably in some franchise nobody's heard of. Of course, I also heard that Cabela tried to make a few games about it, but those games were weird. I don't know if you've seen the Cabela's Dangerous Hunts games, but the attempts that they tried to make for console games out of that was like a really bad trip.
No, I hadn't heard of those.
Yeah, it's certainly something. I will give it that. Now, I know that with it that you are adding in new monsters, but when it comes to existing ones, are you going into what sort of components you can get out of them?
Yeah, I haven't done anything yet for this book where it would be components from existing monsters. I am making the book compatible with Heliana's, and so in that sense, I know that they provided some, actually a lot of like magic item crafting stuff for like existing monsters in the monster manual, or not monster manual, right? It would just be whatever's in the SRD, and magic items from the SRD. So you could take those and convert those into boons. But I think I'm also you'll see a good template essentially through all of the monsters and boons and charms presented in this book on how you would say take monsters from other books and use them to turn their abilities into boons. So all of the boons and charms that are found in this book are literally abilities that monsters in the book have, right? So if you kill a glorious Pride King, which is a celestial lion, and you take its vocal cords, you can conduct a ritual to give yourself its coruscating roar ability. It's not 100% the ability that the monster has, because that's not always balanced as a magic item type effect. but it is it's going to be very similar. It's going to be the player facing version of that.
Mm-hmm.
Where maybe the monster can use it like twice per rest, essentially twice per encounter. Maybe you can use it once per day.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. But because they're essentially all monster abilities, you can start to see the patterns, and you'll be able to look at like, okay, well, if I took a dragon's fire gland or whatever, and I enchanted myself with something to give me a breath weapon,
Mm-hmm.
there you go. Now you have a boon, right?
Yeah. And I realize this next question is a bit of an elephant in the room, but the reason that analogy is used is because elephants are big and hard to ignore. How often has Mega Man been brought up to you when it comes to this concept?
This is the first time.
If that's the case, I'm disappointed in everybody.
I've talked about blue magic with people before, because that's definitely another similarity, right? But yeah, that's a good point. Mega Man definitely has that Kirby kind of similar idea where you eat your enemies and take their powers.
Yeah, and the big reason I brought up Mega Man in that instance is, even though you have that power, it's not like you have it the exact same way as the boss that you just beat.
Yeah.
Like you have a version of it, but it's not a 1-to-1. With the sole exception of Metal Man and Mega Man 2, because Metal Blade is perfectly balanced. I can't say that with a straight face. But you look at a lot of the other boss weapons in Mega Man, the like, and it's in that same vein. If I have to use a more recent example, I'd bring up the boss weapons in the majority of Souls-likes, where it's certainly the same weapon, but you don't use it the same way that the boss did.
Sure.
You don't have those same attack patterns for very, very obvious reasons.
Yeah. You're also probably like a tenth the size of the boss, so the weapon like shrinks down for you.
There's certainly that. And I think another reason that there's a strong foundation for this kind of thing is, let's consider how in various mythologies you have the notion of harvesting what's left over of a legendary creature to create some sort of item that is going to be important later. I'd say one of the big examples is the whole Hydra's blood thing with the 12 labors of Hercules. Taking out the Hydra and then using it and then dipping several arrows in its blood, and that ends up working out for Hercules in a later labor.
Yeah.
It also works against him, but that's Greek mythology for you. Like, it's the original. Anything you do can and will be used against you.
Yeah.
But I know that there is an effect for what happens if you roll if during the ritual check you roll under the DC. But are there effects you have plans if you roll above it beyond just the ritual being a success?
I don't have anything special for just for any roll, but if you roll a nat 20, or potentially, your GM might say if you roll like 5+ above the DC, you can add a positive quirk. So I have a couple of options of each of those for each category, and again, could be something where it's on a creature by creature basis too. So it's not just going to be a single thing, but for example, like Celestial, one of the potential positive boons is +1 on saving throws against being frightened. Definitely feels like a Celestial sort of enhancement, and it's not anything major. You're not gonna like super throw off your game balance with it unless you like get the same one somehow multiple times. And I'm pretty sure I have something in the in the rule book about you can't gain the same quirk more than once at a time. So once you have that, you've got it.
Oh yeah, I can certainly get that. Now, with that in mind, when it came to the boons that I did find in the preview, the highest that they went was very rare. What would be an example of a legendary boon?
Yeah, let me look through my actual written stuff and I will find one. So actually, I think since releasing the preview, I actually upgraded Coruscating Roar to legendary status because it's actually quite powerful. So that one, you basically do a 30-foot radius from you roar that blinds and deafens enemies in addition to dealing radiant and fire damage. And then those blinded and deafened conditions last until they succeed in a Constitution save at the end of each of their turns. Mm-hmm. So that is like, you're doing a bunch of damage. It's a big radius, and you've got some control stuff on those. So that's definitely one of those very powerful ones, for sure.
Yeah, I could get that. Now, when it comes to, I know you mentioned earlier about making it compatible with Heliana's guide to monster hunting. Mm-hmm. I know with the previous take it ended up happening a bit late, but in this case, was it relatively easy to make it so that it could be compatible or standalone if need be?
Yeah, so making it standalone was kind of my number one priority, right? So that's part of why the ritual system and harvesting system are included in the book. Although part of it is also just it's a different option. It's definitely not the same style of crafting system as what they have in Heliana's. But in terms of making it compatible, it was relatively easy. They have a helpful guide for publishers for making things compatible. And so, like, people who use the Heliana's crafting system will recognize the component formatting. So instead of saying just like a Glorious Pride King vocal cord, it's Celestial Glorious Pride King vocal cords. And that's just the way that they have that written. And I was just like, sure, I'm happy to adopt that pattern so that things can be written in the book. I don't need to put every single I don't have to convert every single component's name in a separate table. There's no need for that. But yeah, the boons and charms are very mechanically similar to magic items. So the biggest differences between the two systems, aside from literally how you make progress toward enchanting, are going to be costs and then of course actually using the system. But so like the recipes for the different rarities in my system are just based on the rarity, and your DM could tweak that if they wanted to. Whereas Heliana's and the recipes also just kind of assume the basic 5e, like, here's the very wide price range for these rarity categories. And so I don't like do a case-by-case basis for pricing necessarily. Heliana's uses the like sane magic item pricing guidelines that are out there, and so they do very different. It's a very different sort of economy in terms of currency. Like you might pay like tens of thousands for some crafting. So all of the I'll have a appendix in the book that has the pricing for all of the rituals and everything, and how those would convert over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can get that. And hold on one moment. we are back. Once again, apologies for that. Things are a bit crazy around this time. I don't know, maybe it's because of the spring weather. Or the last remnants of winter. Either way. But I know there's going to be quite a few monster entries to go along with the boons. But I would like to get a feel for some of the monster entries that you're adding in outside of the ones that were in that preview, as far as what your personal favorites out of the list might be, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So I think the first one would be Aberrant, and Aberrants are a wide net.
Yeah.
You presented the False Knight, which is a horrifying idea. Especially for people who play Dark Souls 3 and had to be plagued with mimics. But what other aberrant type monsters are standouts for you within the book?
Yeah, my favorite is probably the Void Worm. So that's going to be one of the most powerful creatures. That one's a CR 23. It is also one of the creatures that's getting a full page art piece thanks to one of the stretch goals we unlocked. So it is a gargantuan is probably an understatement. Sort of eel-like creature that lives out in the far reaches of space and just kind of travels around through space. It can travel very fast when it's moving in a straight line while in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. In fact, its fly speed in that circumstance is a quarter of the speed of light. They live a long time, and sometimes they find themselves wandering around the material plane. And when they settle in a region, they start to have these regional effects of sort of nebulous gases hanging in the air, gravity shifts and surges in the area. So some areas might be, weightless basically, and others might end up being so high gravity that normal creatures can't even move in those areas. And they also sort of mess with distance a bit as well there. So yeah, that's probably my favorite currently created aberration from the book.
Yeah. So moving from aberrations to celestials.
Celestials, I've got a couple of cool ones. This one's not designed yet, but the Angel of Cosmic Balance is going to be fun. But I think my favorite that is actually designed currently is the Origami Lord. This one's actually originally inspired by one of the boons from the first book, or actually it might have been a pact. But this one is basically a giant, again, high CR paper spirit. So it sort of it's made of paper, and it can turn itself into a swarm of smaller paper spirits. So one of its sort of key abilities or signature abilities is 1,000 cuts. So it would literally just be like a area that just gets shredded with 1,000 pieces of paper, blades essentially. It can summon paper archons to fight for it, that'll be one of the I think that's a charm that you can get from defeating it, is to be able to summon one of those paper archons to fight for you.
Oh, yeah. So moving from Celestial, we have Fae.
Yeah. This is another close one. So the faceless one is a good one. I just finished designing the memory thief as well. So memory thief is this like really kind of creepy, like it almost looks like a dirty, poorly kept cat, but like the size of a person, with webbed hands instead of like normal cat feet, and kind of a vaguely human looking face. Something like, if you imagine like the puppets from like Dark Crystal, so it could probably fit in with something from that. Uh, not a fun looking creature. But this thing's sort of signature is that it can drain the memory of its prey from reality, and so when it does that, basically everything else in reality except for it and its prey forget that the prey exists. And that's quite a curse. And it basically just lives on what that creature's life could have been if everyone else still remembered it. Kind of taking some inspiration there from the Stone Angels from Doctor Who.
Weeping Angels.
Or Weeping Angels.
Yeah.
Yeah, where they
assassins.
Yeah, they send you back in time and eat the life that you could have had. This one is just, well, you're still around. If you can find someone who can cast Remove Curse on you, you will be okay. But good luck having that happen when no one can remember that you exist.
Yeah. So shifting from Fae, there is Primal, which because Primal is a lot of like animal adjacent affairs, that's another one that's going to be a wide net.
Yeah. So I've got a bunch of different things planned for that, including some new like elementals and things. But I think my favorite one so far is the rune-marked elk, which I also recently created. This one's inspired by an artwork or an illustration that I commissioned for the like rituals section of the book. And so, imagine, an elk, except probably more like moose sized, and with runes, glowing engraved in their antlers and kind of glowing off of their hide, and in their fur.
Yeah.
And basically, like it's they have your normal, horned ungulate type things, so they're going to have a charge. They have antlers and hooves, but they also are just generally protected by their runes, and they can step through natural environments without difficulty, so they can ignore difficult terrain from natural environments. And then they have this earthshake stomp, which lets them essentially like create a localized earthquake and crack the ground open and get people to sink into it. So quite a powerful creature, at least as far as like, wild animals go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see it, and well, there's plenty of animals throughout real world nature that are the embodiment of the FAFO principle. So it's easy to make them worse.
Yes.
I'd say if anyone wants inspiration for aberrant creatures, just look at deep sea life.
Yep.
There's some weird ones, and some ones that are probably going to live rent free in your head for a week. But the last of the major categories, of course, is unholy.
Yeah. So looking at things, so I would say probably my favorite unholy one so far is the Executioner Devil, but that's in the sample document. So outside of that, the Lieweaver is a very interesting one. It is a demon spider, capable of taking on a humanoid or semi-humanoid form, and it essentially focuses on spinning webs of lies and trying to turn people against each other. It thrives on creating chaos from betrayals. So the more personal, the more strong the bond is that they break, the more reward they get from that. And this creature has a ability called Web of the Deceiver, and it creates a web that lasts for a day, and it basically, while you're restrained by the web, you witness an endless swarm of illusory spiders. So the web itself doesn't necessarily hurt you, but as long as you're there, you imagine that you are being devoured by the swarm of spiders, which is definitely a horrifying experience and not something I ever want to be part of.
Oh yeah, I could get that. And what would you be shooting for as far as the full page count? I know that this might change due to stretch goals and the like.
Yeah, I usually shoot for at least, somewhere in the 200 to 250 page range, but it can absolutely change. So, like, we unlocked a stretch goal that adds 2 more stat blocks for every monster. Yeah. So instead of 100 stat blocks, there are now 300 stat blocks, and so that's going to change the amount of space that we have. Although it just also depends on, how much space those stat blocks take up and everything. So yeah, we'll see. I usually aim for something in that range. It might end up on the longer side. We'll see.
Yeah, I know that one of these stretch goals is a ritual enhancement system. What exactly is that entailing?
Yeah, so our next goal is the ritual enhancement system. I don't think that's the final name for it, but that's the name I have for it at the moment. But essentially, so anyone familiar with the first book knows that there are pacts in that book, and this system is essentially letting people make their own pacts. So taking a recipe for a boon or a charm and adding some kind of additional cost to it. So that could be a one-time cost that you pay when you get the enchantment placed on you, sort of as part of that ritual. Or it could also be something that's like every time you activate it, you pay an additional cost in order to get the ability, and in return, the boon becomes more powerful. So this will be another thing where I will probably provide some examples of things that you can do, and how to do it. But I suspect that there will be, a number of options that you might think of that I don't include in the book that you could also do with this. But yeah, the general idea is adding those costs in return for extra power, and being able to set up that sort of pact type of ability.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, and that'll certainly be an interesting thing to come up, and I do have a feeling that threshold's going to get hit in a few days. Knocking on wood, just so I don't tempt the gods of irony, because if it ends up not hitting that at the end of the 17 days of the time we're recording this, I will never hear the end of it.
Yeah, I think we'll probably get there before the end. A few days might be. That would be great if it was a few days, but.
Yeah, but. That's why I'm knocking on wood when it comes to this, because I know how the gods of irony work. And you much as I have probably seen at least one case of somebody saying, "Oh, this roll is going to be easy," and then they fumble. there's always that, or or somebody saying, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, that's tempting fate right there.
Hmm. It's not just tempting fate. It's the equivalent
It's
of
taunting fate.
it is walking around with not a kick me sign, but a bullseye on your back saying aim here.
Yeah.
Which some people are going to do anyways, and then act surprised when the inevitable happens. But what would you be shooting for as far as a release window for the digital version at the very least? I know with the physical that's going to be tricky at the best of times, let alone these days.
Yeah. Yeah, digital release, I usually aim to have, I mean, just in terms of like how it's worked in the past. So for like the last campaign, which I guess ran like a month earlier than this one, in terms of time of year. But I had digital out by December. But yeah, generally speaking, like, you know, to get physical done, you have to have the digital layout down first, obviously, and then you go and you send the file to, physical production. And then you have to like go back and forth on like, well, this thing isn't appearing in what it's supposed to, doesn't look right, even though it looks right in the digital version. So then you have to figure out what's going on there. So there's usually some, a couple of weeks of just like back and forth figuring that out, and then you actually get to do production and shipping and all that stuff. So yeah, just physical is always an uncertain thing. I always bake in extra time. But yeah, I would say I'm aiming for like, end of the year for digital release again, and I always try to do sooner, and there's always other delays. Quality is always my number one focus, and after that, delivering on time. So
yeah, I can get that. But with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule and putting up with all the insanity that goes around in my monastery. Anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged.
Thanks for having me, and yeah, I'd be happy to be back.
Mm-hmm. And of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there will be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
Soy yo la cuna de los